Not even sure why I wanted to do this video because I've already reviewed Perlisten's best speakers, the S series, so the R series obviously won't be as good, right? The clear visual differences between the two are the differences in driver materials. The S series uses Techstream's thin ply polycarbonate diaphragms with this checkerboard pattern for their bass drivers, while the R series uses their proprietary HPF pulp, which stands for hybrid pulp formulation. So one feels like a stiff plastic and the other one feels like paper. S series has a beryllium tweeter, and the R series has a soft silk dome tweeter. The tweeters and mids on the S use 28mm drivers, while the R is a little smaller using 26mm drivers. And these are the differences that we can see with our own eyes. There are other differences with crossover design and the build quality. While it's still dense feeling to the touch, it uses less layers of HDF for its enclosure, so its overall construction isn't as thick, although you'd be hard-pressed to tell the difference. For me, the S series was endgame status for home theater and for a 2-channel setup, so for at almost half the price, how good could the reference series possibly be? The models I've been using for home theater duties are the R5t towers for front, left, and right, the R5m monitors for surround duty, the R5c center channel, and a pair of R210 subwoofers. All the speakers share Perlisten's DPC technology, which is directivity pattern control. It's this part here where the tweets and the mids sit in this waveguide to help control directivity, as the name implies. All the speakers also use the same 6.5-inch bass drivers. The subwoofers use two 10-inch drivers in each one in a push-pull configuration, with one on the front baffle and the other located on the bottom. It's a powerful, somewhat smallish box being pushed by a 1.3 kilowatt amplifier. I don't normally like using tower speakers in my home theater. Instead, I rather prefer opting for smaller matching speakers all around for the cohesiveness. But seeing how the S series performed, I wanted to experience something a little bit bigger up front. So using the R5t towers up front was more impressive than when I had the S5Ms up front. Clearly they're bigger speakers and they can play down to 21 Hz in room, so that's essentially full range without a subwoofer. The surround channels are no slouches either, reaching down to 37 Hz. So when hooking these guys up to the Trinov Amplitude processor and the Amplitude 8M amps running full range, it was truly an eargasm experience. Playing back the underwater demo on the Kaleidoscape pummeled my theater with enough tactile feedback that you might be tricked into thinking that I had a couple subwoofers turned on. Not only was this wave of pressure coming from me at the front of the room, but also the surrounds as well. If you've got bass limited speakers, then you're definitely going to want to cross them over with a sub. But with this R series combination, if you don't have the space for subs, you can no doubt get away with using these guys full range. Now keep in mind that this is room dependent, so what I'm hearing in my space will likely be very different for yours. The initial attack on the explosions are as taut and forceful as some 10-inch subwoofers that I've had in here for review. I was able to play them to tinnitus-causing levels without feeling like these were going to overdrive. And even with that final explosive wave, although it won't make your arm hairs move, I could feel the shock wave resonate through my room without any slop or boominess or even bottoming out. I've even had 21-inch subwoofers in here that can't handle this scene. The tower speakers had no problems. And as impressive as these can sound on their own without subwoofers, adding in the two subwoofers takes this scene up to spine-tingling levels. Now, since this is a THX certified speaker system, crossing them over at 80 Hz made for a seamless blend between speaker and subs. And in case you missed the review for the subs, they went down to 7 Hz in my room. This is a feat that only serious subwoofers can mess around with. They're not your everyday internet direct black boxes. And did I mention that the subs have their own app-controlled DSP with built-in PEQs for you fine calibration nerds out there? I've got a full review on the channel if you want some more detail on the subs. But back to the sound quality, the natural handoff between subwoofer and speaker adds tremendous kick along with some infrasonic extension. Now if you didn't have the space for the towers and wanted to go with something a little bit smaller like the R5ms for the front channels, they still have a very respectable amount of output down low. Actually, a lot more than you might expect. They don't have the same bottom end weightiness of the towers, but the way they hit the mid bass sounded the same and felt the same as the towers. And since the towers do reach lower, you will get a broader sense of space, especially in this particular movie, as it has this ever-present low-end rumble. The R5Ms in comparison could feel a bit more closed in, so pairing up the subwoofers with the 5Ms can even the playing field. One thing that I figured would be a big departure from the S series was the soft dome tweeters. The beryllium tweeters on the signatures have just the right amount of high-end detail without sounding overly bright and aggressive. And with movie mixes as good as A Quiet Place, that detail and transparency should be so clean it should make your speakers vanish. Now with the R series soft dome tweeters, they still captured every ounce of this delicately atmospheric mix. So when your speakers melt your walls and present you with nature in your house, you know that your tweeters are doing something right. All the ambient effects like insects and birds sounds as if you're sitting outside with Mother Nature surrounding you in an envelope of sonic cohesiveness. So having the same drivers all around gives you perfect timbre, never allowing any group of speakers to draw your attention in one direction or another, which can collapse the illusion of what you're hearing. Now even with this level of detail refinement, I do think the S series has a touch more airiness on the top end, or if you prefer, it's got a little bit more sparkle. So while I think it can be tough to decipher the amount of detail between the S and the R series with movie soundtracks, it's a bit more apparent when you're using them in a two-channel setup. It's not that the R series isn't as detailed as the S is, I just think it's a bit more rounded or softer in its treble presentation. It's pretty easy to tell when listening to songs with a sharp S. So in the song Sweet Jane by the Cowboy Junkies, the S in Sweet didn't have the same sharpness as the S series. It was just a touch more rolled off with the soft dome tweeters. In the song Home by Dominique Fils-Aimé, there's a little sizzle at the end of the song that's very clearly distinct on the S series, while it's more recessed on the R. I mean, some folks might like the softer end response on the reference series, especially if you're playing at louder volumes, which can be easier on your ears for long movie viewing sessions. But you know, it's going to be a totally subjective thing. Oh, and I almost forgot to bring up the center channel. If there's one speaker in the R lineup that isn't touching the S series, it's that center channel. The S7C center is basically a tower speaker lying on its side. It's the most robust center speaker that I've heard yet, although the little R5C is still an impressive speaker. I mean, from top to bottom, given its size, it digs deep if you're going to run at full range, and the mid-range projection is meaty with a manly gravitas for deep voices. Palpatine should sound beefy and forceful and not thin and anemic.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
And the fact that all the speakers have the same complement of drivers means that you'll get the same performance out of each one, which again goes back to being timbre matched. There's folks out there that get these big tower speakers up front, but then turn around and cheap out and get a small center channel. Well, there's actually tons of bass that comes out of that center, so if you can make it fit, get a quality center channel. It's where most of the action happens, and the R5C excels for anchoring dialogue. I questioned whether or not I wanted to review these speakers because I didn't think they'd sound as good as the Perlisten's higher end models. Because if we're going to go by price, the S series should sound considerably better. But for me personally, after spending a lot of time with both series, I ended up buying the R5ts because they're just that good. I wanted to have a pair of speakers that were neutral sounding that I could use as a reference to compare to other speakers when I'm reviewing. They've got amazing bass, mid-range is exceptionally clean, and the top end is smoothly detailed and crisp. And this applies to the R5m and the R5C, minus the extra bass response, of course. I'd say if you're on the fence between the S and the R series and maybe you're kind of struggling with the financials, I think the R is so close to the S that you won't feel like you're missing much. Now, if you do have a massive room, then you might need the extra output that the S can provide. The good thing is, if you need help choosing what works best for your space, you can pick up any of these speakers at dreammediaav.com, and they can help you design and set up your home theater space or your 2-channel space. So if you decide to give the Dream Media guys a call, make sure that you mention the channel so they can give you that extra care and attention. Now, I will leave some links down below in this video's description for everything that I've mentioned in this video. Well, those are my thoughts on the Perlisten R series speakers. If you've got a chance to hear them, then leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video if you found it useful and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you again in the next video.
Let's go!